TV.
Welcome to LdnOnt TV here on Rogers TV. I am your host, Bronagh Morgan, and it is a pleasure to be back talking to all of our neighbors in London, in southwestern Ontario, and it's a pleasure to be back in the Rogers studio here close to the Western Fair in London. It has been a while. Here's my first show taping in the studio, so please be patient with me, and please be patient with me. I'll beg my guest as well. And what a guest we have to start off our season. His name is John Rowlands. So probably for a lot of people, he needs no introduction. But for those people who don't know John Rowlands, he's had a storied career as a photographer, has traveled all around the world with many, many musicians that you definitely know the names of throughout his career. Started out long ago, I think, inspired by your father. So I watched a few of your other interviews as well before coming today. And inspired by your father, who was also a photographer as well as a military man. Got involved in the music industry just by, I think, chance. And here we are. 60 years later, here we are. So welcome and thank you for coming today, John.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess you've told this story before, but for our viewers who have not heard how it all got started for you, it was at a Peggy Lee concert, is that right?
Close, Brenda Lee.
Brenda Lee.
Yeah.
Right.
I was a kid in Ottawa and followed Brenda Lee for my teenage career days and had every record she had. And when she came to Ottawa, let's see, September 26, 1960, I was there.
Wow.
And my dad lent me a camera, a couple of rolls of film, bought me a whole bunch of color blue flash bulbs, and set me loose on the auditorium. And after the show, I saw the dressing rooms down the corridor, and it was a hockey arena, so Brenda Lee and the Casuals on the door, and I walked down and said, what the heck, all I can say is no. And knocked on the door and said, I'd like to thank Brenda for a great show. And that was her mother that answered the door. And she said, well, why don't you come in and tell her yourself, she's sitting right over there. And I did that and met her, and we talked for half an hour about schooling on the road. And so on and so forth. I got an autograph, I got a kiss on the cheek, and away I went. I'm quite happy that, it cost $1.50 to go to the show in those days.
That's reasonable. And
because, I wanted all my friends to have merchandise, because not a lot of kids could afford T-shirts and stuff like that. So I bought a few T-shirts and then I wound my way home. And I guess a week later, I got a phone call from Nashville, and they said, if you send down the negatives, then we'll pay you. And we're going to use the prints and just keeping track of Brenda's archives and so on, and sounded okay to me, and that's what photographers do, so it's fine. And then they called back later on and made sure I got my $35,
nice.
And, which was a lot of money for a kid in those days.
Absolutely.
An ounce of gold, for reference, was $32 an ounce.
Oh my goodness.
Big change.
No
and anyway, said, oh, by the way, a friend of ours is a manager for another singer, and they're coming to Ottawa to do the same thing, which is a Coca-Cola style club. And he wants you to take pictures, and he'll pay you $50.
Oh my goodness.
So the entertainer was Sam Cooke.
Oh my goodness.
So that's where I started, and of course, as soon as that happened, then everybody go, wow, he's shooting these rock and roll stars. And I became kind of a celebrity for the gang. And
for your gang in Ottawa,
yeah,
like your gang of friends.
for everybody that followed the Coca-Cola Club. And that's where it all started. I worked for just about everybody up to a certain point with great density through all the British invasion years and that sort of stuff. James Brown, and, very, very colorful, flamboyant people that I didn't take a lot of energy to figure them out. They were already displaying it on the stage, and I got the best of them. And started amassing a collection, and then escalating with prices and whatnot. And bands started flying me out on tour and things like that. And I was really enjoying it. And it took me 9 times around the world, and in lovely hotels and limos at the airport and all this kind of stuff as my, I guess, popularity increased. And we made the best of it because it was there to make the best of.
Absolutely.
And I've done, let's see, 2 books so far, and Bob Klanick, who did Promo Man for Nick Panasico, is writing one about me. So, and going to feature 650 pictures. So,
so over the course of your career, it's been about how long since you started?
60 years.
Yeah, so 60 years as a professional photographer. Could you even imagine how many photographs you've taken?
About 4.5 million.
4.5 million. So that's a lot of film, or I guess.
A lot of film, and now we're starting to catalog them.
Yeah. So what is that project?
And it's number one, I have a really good scanner.
Okay.
And you scan everything into digits, and that way you can print them on an inkjet printer, sophisticated inkjet printer, and make them as photographs. And they look like and probably taste like photographs.
So you've never tasted a photograph?
No, not yet. But it's a huge task, and we're just starting to get ready to do it now. And it's been a year since I moved into the apartment building I'm in now.
And how long have you been here in London?
Well, I've lived here 3 times over my lifespan, and 1954 was the first time for 4 years. My dad was in the Air Force, and then came back in '88 and bought a farm in Hensel, so I was kind of local. And a lot of it didn't matter where I lived, because with plane fares and whatnot, you can pretty much be anywhere from anywhere when you're working. So,
of course.
And that was it. 3 times in London now. I came back in '17. I was living in Sedona, Arizona, and 2012 had a stroke. And the only thing that said I'm lucky to be alive was they didn't put the siren on in the ambulance to drive me to Phoenix, you see. So it was necessary to get me there quick, but no emergency life or death. So that kind of softened the ride. And now, 2 days before the pandemic started, I had 2 more strokes. And I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk. So I've come a long way from that. Parkwood has got great people.
Absolutely.
Absolutely incredible girls up there. And I told them, anytime you need somebody to come and talk, I do a show called John Rowlands Photographic Memories. And A lot of people have seen that show. I did about a year of it with some kind of intensity until down came the pandemic and all the craziness that went on with that.
No kidding. And down comes this break, and so that has to be the end of our segment, but we do have another segment to chat more because I want to hear more about these Rockin' Rowlands memories after the break, and I know all our viewers will as well.
Yeah.
So please stay with us, and we'll be right back with more John Rowlands on LdnOnt TV.
This program is brought to you by the following sponsors.
Smoke alarms expire after 10 years. Check the date and test your smoke alarm today.
Most people that are have received treatment for drug use problems are probably going to have a lapse.
Join addictions counselor Dean Anderson for Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction on Rogers TV.
My name is Matthew Rutledge. I'm a 60 scoop survivor, born in Red Lake. Was adopted from there to Toronto at the age of 4. A lot of our brothers and sisters, family members got separated from each other. That was the government's goal, to break that connection from brothers and sisters. Basically taking the Indian out of the child. Right now, they're still trying to find themselves. Originally, my birth name is Harvey Halverson. In my high school days, teens, I was trying to fit into society. I knew I was First Nations, but I didn't know who I was inside. I think later in life, I started that journey. I am proud, Nishnawbe man, who I am now. I love life, who I am.
You're watching Rogers TV.
Welcome back to LdnOnt TV here on Rogers TV. I'm your host, Bronagh, and we've been chatting with the legendary John Rowlands, Rockin' Rowlands, the photographer that has been able to travel 9 times around the world, I think you said, taking pictures for the last 60 years of some of the biggest names in rock and roll. So the cataloging project, we are chatting, as I always tend to do, during the break, about what the cataloging project is all about, and I guess what your goals are in terms of sharing these 4 million plus images with the world.
Well, it's locking it up in time if I leave them behind with some sort of regiments, and it's a tough nut to, number one, scan them, and scan them properly at 1600 DPI, dots per inch, and then again we have to catalog their names. Mm-hmm. And then my friend Sandra in Philadelphia has got the knowledge to put together an AI program that will find anybody I can name, and if I say Mick Jagger and misspell Mick or anything like that, it'll tell me all the Mick Jagger shots I've got. And then by then we'll have the filing system organized, and I'll go straight to the drawer and say, okay, here's 30 shots of Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger with the Rolling Stones, another envelope, you see. And that's how we're going to do it. And of course, with all this programming, it takes a while.
Absolutely.
And it seems I am still here ticking, so.
And we're so fortunate that you are. And so with the cataloging project, it's really about sharing what you were able to experience with, touring with all these incredible artists for all those years, with people who maybe will, especially with concert tickets not being $1 anymore, never get a chance to see what you saw, never get a chance to hear what you heard and experience what you've been able to experience.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the reason why I did it and liked doing it, because James Burton's a very good friend of mine. He played guitar with Elvis. and I got to know him over the years, and I tried, because I'm in a publishing sort of interest level to a lot of book companies, and every time I mentioned James Burton, they just got quiet, largely because they weren't up enough to know. He's a brilliant man on Telecaster guitar. He's been endorsing it since '53, and a close personal friend, and his wife Louise. He's got 20 or 30 old cars he's managed to collect, and also several hundred guitars over the years, and we all like to get into collecting things that have to do with our job. I had 4 guitar collections over the years, and amassed up some pretty interesting products. The underwriter one day came up from Phoenix to evaluate my collection, and he did everything on paper and properly for the insurance company, and said, called me a week later and gave me an assessment. He said, John, collecting guitars is it beats the hell out of the stock market or any other thing that might be out there.
Wow.
And you made more money just having them in your office and playing them yourself.
So you play as well?
I used to, but now I'm half paralyzed.
Right.
But
photography was your first love. Did you start playing guitar because you were, learning from some of these incredible musicians?
It was all, rock and roll. My parents weren't that tight on discipline, and Dad was here in '58. And we watched Elvis Presley with my parents' full consent. And my dad knew the weatherman at CFBL was a guy named Paul Soules. And Paul's still alive, living near Hawkesbury. And he actually had a bit part in one of the Spider-Man movies.
Oh, cool.
So. And he did my dad, who was an instructor at Centralia, which is an old Air Force base past Exeter. Mm-hmm. And that's all my energy came from my dad, because he was an avid amateur photographer and a music man on the radio, playing records for his son John, like Teddy Bear's Picnic by Les Paul, Mary Ford, and things like that, and I picked up on it all, and emulating my dad being on the radio and all that good stuff. That's the seeds for the start, and then rock and roll came along, and bang, I was right there.
So is there any limitation on you being able to continue your photography? Can you still?
Well, I'm not keen about taking pictures, because I recognize that I've done everything I wanted to, and that's quite satisfying. I have no regrets, and but it still bothers me if I see somebody shooting from a different angle than I would shoot. I go over there and try and help if I can, or if they want me to, and. Other than that, I've got a timer effect on my iPhone. Dial in 10 seconds and hold it up and steady, and it automatically takes the picture. But I can't be quick enough to push the button with a hand that doesn't relax too easily.
Understood.
But we get by, and a lot of things are, making memories any way you can. I'm not living in the past, but I'm making a lot of people happy with pictures from the past.
Absolutely.
And that's my satisfaction with it all at the end of the line. So.
Have you been surprised by anything, like 4 million pictures, 4 million of anything, even if you created it yourself? I can imagine that maybe when you're going through this documentation process, it reminds you of something that you completely forgotten about. Like, how is it bringing back those stories to you?
In '74, I worked with George Harrison on a Canadian tour, and we gave him a soapstone carving from the Inuit Indians up north, and I took several pictures of him with this thing, and he was telling us about going out to St. John's Wood and buying Stratocasters to play a song called Strawberry Fields Forever with the Beatles. And yeah, getting into all that kind of stuff, and he became quite a friend. And I met him in '65 when I was backstage walking from one side of the gardens to the next. And it was a shortcut if I went backstage, and he was sitting talking to his speakers from the Vox Super Beetle amps, and sat down with him and said I was shooting with Capitol and I was listening to your conversation. And after that, George and I became good friends. And I could phone George in England at a place called Cracker Jack Palace anytime it was convenient, just to see how he was, what he's doing, and what his plans were. I knew all about the traveling Wilburys before they happened, and things like that, just in keeping track of people I enjoyed. And George and I were quite good friends, so for that I'm quite happy. You know, it's mixing a social aspect with a personal aspect.
Well, now we're friends, hopefully, and you'll come back and visit with me again, because that's all the time we have for today. But sure. I know there's probably, whatever, 399 million more stories that you could share with our viewers, and I know everybody would love to hear them. So thank you so much for being here, John Rowlands. We're going to take another break, but we're going to be right back with more LdnOnt TV.
This program is brought to you by the following sponsors.
When an impaired driver killed my brother DJ, my life changed forever. During the pandemic, all of our lives changed, and many of us turned to alcohol and drugs to cope. As life returns to normal, the increase in substance use from COVID has lingered, and some police services report an increase in impaired driving that caused heartbreak and devastation. Now, more than ever, we need your commitment to never drive impaired, and to encourage all of your family and friends to do the same. Together, we can save lives.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Mario Elia, and I'm the host of a new show here on Rogers TV that we're calling Keeping London Healthy with Dr. Mario. So tune in Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. and we'll see you then.
Night's action on Rogers TV.
You're watching Rogers TV.
Welcome back to LdnOnt TV here on Rogers TV. I'm your host, Bronagh. I've been speaking with well-known artist. A lot of people across Canada, around the world, have heard of John Rowlands and appreciated his work over the years. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing an artist that maybe you have not heard of, somebody I was so fortunate to meet when I was talking in a park this year. Her name is Sarita, and Sarita is the self-published author of this book of poetry, as well as she's a dancer, and I think you did the illustrations as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
So welcome to the show, Sarita.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. So it was during the pandemic that you decided to, I guess, either get into poetry or publish enough poetry that it became a book.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so when did you start writing?
I started actually writing poems in grade 2 with my teacher, Miss Maharg. But then I started writing for the book in grade 3 in like probably close to November. And then I kept going on, and then by February I published it.
That's fantastic. So I guess to get enough poetry for a book in that short span of time, you must be writing a lot.
Yeah, I did.
So what inspires you? What's your favorite thing to write about? Because a lot of the poems are just about things that happen in daily life, aren't they?
Yeah.
So what's your favorite?
My favorite poem there is Friends, because I have a lot of friends, and I just had the idea to write about them one day.
Awesome. And so a lot of people write, right? I write every day, but it never really occurs to me that I should put it all together into a book. So did you have this in your mind when you were writing these poems, that you wanted to be able to put them all together and share them with other people like me?
Actually, at first, my teachers inspired me, and then my mom told me one day, once I finished writing a bunch of poems, that I should publish this book.
What a great idea. So how about the artwork? Does the poem come first, or does the art come first, the drawings?
The first I did the poems, because as you can see, the pictures there are actually from different poems. There's a pizza poem, there's a candy poem, there's a nature poem.
Yep, they're fantastic. And so nice, quick read. And so it's a very attractive book too, very colorful, and you've really laid it out really nicely. So it's really enjoyable to read.
Thank you.
How about your other artistic pursuits? So I know you're a dancer as well.
Yeah.
So when did you get into dancing?
In grade 1, I started with a teacher, and then I recently moved to a different teacher.
And how do you enjoy that?
I really enjoy it.
And absolutely, as as somebody who does a lot of different things like you, so I guess that's maybe how we were able to connect so easily when we met in the park this summer. How do you keep all these things going? Like now you've got school as well, plus dancing, plus writing, plus drawing. How do you keep everything organized?
I actually have a bunch of other lessons as well. So like piano, guitar, and I also have Bengali singing. And once I do those, like I kind of remember the times, because like for the first few days it just was a mess. And then I started remembering it.
I think that's how a lot of us are feeling in September, when we're all getting back to routines. And how about school this year? Are you looking forward to being back in class?
Yes, I'm very excited, and I really like my teacher.
Fantastic. Well, that's great news, and I hope your teacher, like your other teachers in the past, will continue to inspire you, because I'm looking forward to your maybe next book.
It's actually going to be published very soon. I finished it, and and all I have to do is publish it.
Fantastic. So we have all kinds of things to look forward to in the arts world here in London. Sarita, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in. Thank you again to John Rowlands for being here, and we hope you've enjoyed this episode of LdnOnt TV. I'm your host, Bronagh, and hopefully you'll tune in a couple of weeks for our next episode.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
It was my daughter's birthday. She was blowing out the candles on her cake when we heard coming from the TV. So we stopped and listened, and it helped us get to safety. That's why when I think of my daughter's birthday, because now she gets to keep having them.
Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m., it's the RTV quiz. Giovanni Petiti hosts a weekly trivia competition that lets you